To another Win32com video. This particular video, we are going to be covering Word, Word document using the Win32com library. So I'm finally back. Last couple days I tried recording a video and it didn't go that well, to put it nicely. So basically, for whatever reason, I lost my voice, I would say, like a week ago, maybe. And I really didn't lose it, but basically what was happening was if I talked longer than 5 minutes, it would go completely out. And when it was really bad, I couldn't even reach certain frequencies. And so basically, if I got beyond a certain frequency, my voice would just completely go mute. And it was really funny to watch because you're trying to see me talk, and naturally, just nothing would come out. But yeah, it's been an interesting few weeks, to say it nicely. Obviously, we're in some interesting times, and there's a lot going on with the coronavirus, and I don't think any of us really imagined it would be where we're at now, and basically having the entire global economy shut down. I mean, that's still kind of hard to fathom right now, and just to see the broad impact it's having just across the globe. And so it will be interesting to see how this all plays out and how we come out the other side. Obviously, there's going to be people who are impacted by this. There's already people impacted by this. Just for reference, I'm in San Diego. And so, seeing what's going on here has been pretty remarkable, in the sense of seeing how people are just, some people have lost their jobs, some people, they can't go into work or something like that. I mean, it's really kind of amazing to see, and not in a good way. It's just amazing in the sense of how fast and how volatile everything's been, and then seeing that propagate through the markets as well. I mean, we're seeing some very extreme volatility, but I'm more of an optimist. So even in these really tough times, I tend to look more towards the future and saying, things will get better eventually. There's going to be definitely some short-term pain I think a lot of us are going to have to go through. But I think, once we come out on the other side, I think we'll be hopefully in a better spot than we are right now. But there's definitely some steps that we're going to have to take as people. And I think even just as consumers, a lot of small businesses have been impacted. And unfortunately, some are not going to come out on the other side. But something we can do is obviously help support them by spending money a little bit at small businesses during this tough time, especially if we're able to. But enough with that. I have a whole another video where we get to explore the economic impact of this, because I did study econ. So this has been very interesting, at least for me. But what are we going to do today in today's video? Well, this was interesting because I had a comment on one of my videos where they were talking about, hey, you should do a video on the topic of formulas that you can use in word tables. And I said, it's funny because I remember using them like once or twice and I never went back to it. And I said, that's actually a really interesting topic. And I started exploring a little bit more, and I realized like there's a lot that you can do with that. I mean, there is a ton you can do with that. And I really probably going to do a couple of videos on this, but for right now, I kind of want to just get us familiar with working with these formulas, which we're going to call fields for the time being, and understanding, how we need to look at them from a Win32com perspective. And then naturally, if we understand how to do it there, then being able to translate it over to VBA should be relatively quick. So really the goal is to take a table object like this, and I apologize in advance. I'm going to be clearing my throat a lot, and I've got my water. Ooh, okay. Sorry, I just had to clear my throat. Once I clear it, it's fine. It's just, I'm gonna have to clear it. But yeah, so we're gonna take a table object and we're gonna insert fields into them, and those fields are gonna do different things. They could do something like formatting, or they could do something like a formula. So like a formula in the sense of like, hey, take this column and subtract the value in this column to get, something like your profit, right? So that's really what these fields are. And then if you actually right click, you will notice there's kind of these options called update field, edit field, and then toggle field codes. So basically, if you look at these, each one of these is basically like a field code, and that field code really encapsulates a formula and a number format. And so that field code, the way you would read this is the formula, so that it equals this formula. And you kind of notice that it's using, what is it, the R1, C1 notation. And then also we have our number format. So I think that's really cool. Additionally, you can edit the field. So this is where I kind of realized, like, wow, there's a ton here. And I didn't realize just kind of how deep this goes. But in this case, I'm working with a formula. So I've defined that formula, and then I've defined a number format that I can use as well. So there's a lot to this. There's definitely going to be more videos to come. But for this video, we're just going to kind of keep it simple and just do like a formatting one. And then we're going to do an actual formula one. All right. So first things first is you do need to create a new Python script. And then once you have that Python script created, you do need to import one library. And that library is Win32com. And then we're going to do the client module. And then from there, we're going to give it an alias. So we're just going to call it Win32. Not Win32com, Win32. And then from here, we need to grab the active instance of Word. So the active instance, meaning the one that I have currently open and the one that I want to work with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the active instance of Word, and I'm going to store that in a variable called Word app, and it's going to be Win32. There is a get active object method, and inside there, we can pass through the program ID. In this case, because I'm working with Word, I'm going to call the Word application program ID, and then this will return the active instance of Word. If you don't believe me, just print out that Word app object, and you should see something where we can now see the Microsoft Word. Funny note, something about me basically having this like weak voice is I am now able to make it sound really raspy and like Darth Sidious. And I think that's awesome because now I can just feel super evil some nights, and I'll just start, saying his quotes as I'm like coding to myself. I think it's funny, but that's how I get through my day. Okay, then from here, we have our Word application. We're obviously going to want to work with the document object because the document houses the table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the active document. So the active document just means the one that we have the cursor in. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to store that in a variable as well, just to kind of make sure we're being nice and clean about writing our code. In this case, the Word application has a property called active document. That basically represents the document that we're currently working with. Alrighty, and then a document can have a tables collection in it. So a tables collection basically means all the table objects in that document. Well, my document's very simple. It only has one table, so I'm just going to grab that one table. So create a reference to the table. And so we're going to call Word table equals the Word document, and then we're going to take the tables collection, and then with that tables collection, there is an item method, and with the item method, we can specify that we want the first item in that collection. There's many different ways to do it, but I think it's also important that you see those different ways. Now, a table is obviously made up of rows, columns, and cells. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to actually work with entire columns, and the goal is to take certain columns, and what we're going to do is we're going to update it so that way they have certain formatting inside of them. So for two of those columns, the cost and the sale column, we want to do more formatting operations. And then for our final column, which is the profit column, we want that to actually be a formula that also maintains certain formatting rules. So normally what I do in this situation, again, I'm a little bit OCD. I like to just define everything beforehand. So I'm just going to say, grab all the columns. And really, I'm not grabbing them. I'm really just kind of creating a reference to them. But in this case, I'm going to say, okay, my sales column is Word tables. and then it's going to be columns, and then it's going to be 1. So the table object has a columns collection. Again, the collection just meaning all of those objects. And when we're talking about the columns collection, that means all the individual columns in that table. So this is a column. This is another column. And guess what? This is another column. So technically, my table has 3 columns. That first column is my sales column. That second column is my cost column. And so we'll just call that cost columns. And then my final one is my profit column. And so we'll say word table, and then we'll do columns and then 3. I had to take another sip. It was starting to go out again. Okay. And then from here, what do we do next? Well, let's take it one column at a time, and we'll start going through the operations that we need to do. So for the first column, it's going to be really simple. We're just going to do formatting. And then for the second column, we're going to do the same exact thing. Now, really what I want to do is I want to actually only format the columns that are not the headers. There's different ways to do this. I'm just going to show you the way I did it. I think for the most part, it will work in most situations. But really, I want basically the body of it. So I don't care about this guy up here. I care about these cells right here. So what I'm going to first do is I'm going to delete them. And I'm just going to put in, some fake numbers. And we'll just put this like, what, 600,000. Okay. And then this one will be 800,000. And I want it to be like a currency format, right? So I'll also do the same here. I'll do, I don't know, 20,000, and then we'll do 10,000, and then we'll do 30,000. Nothing fancy. So what I'm going to first do is loop through each cell in the sales column. And then we're going to say for sale cell in list sale column, there is a cells collection. And then what I did is I took that collection and I put it into a list object. So that list now has basically multiple individual cell objects. And all I want is everything after the first one. So basically, in this case, I know that that sales column is going to have 4 cells. And all I'm saying is, I don't care about the first one, just give me the 3 after it. So that's basically what this little guy right here is. It's slicing that list and it's saying, hey, just give me everything after the first guy. Then from there, I'm going to do a couple different things. Some of these are going to make a little bit more sense after you kind of understand the issues that you can run into. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the text. So I'll create a new variable. I'll call it sales cells text. And then I'll take my sales cell range. So basically I'm taking my cell object. A cell object has a range property, which defines the range in that document it takes up. And then that range property has a text property. And so that actually is the text inside that range, because you can think of a range as basically a section of that document, but not that entire range has to necessarily have text in it. So this one's going to return just the text inside of that range. Now I'm going to do something again that's going to look a little weird, and you're going to say, well, why are you doing this? And also making sure it's a capital T. I'm going to clear out the old text. If I don't do this, when I insert a field, it's going to just insert it before the existing text. So if you do not clear it out, you will have basically the old text with the new field. Now you need to do this after you grab the original text. If you do not grab it after the original text, then you're not going to be able to grab anything. So first grab it, then erase the old text. Then from here, we're going to create something called our formula string. Every time we add a field, we need to give it basically the formula or the code, the field code that we're going to be using to basically put into that field. So I'm going to create, I guess the best way to really call this is a field code. So we'll just call it field code. And again, it's going to be a string. That string is going to have a placeholder. I'm going to call it my number for the time being. And then this is where things get a little bit confusing, but basically we're going to do a forward slash, I think, and then a number sign that basically says this is the formatting rule that we want to set. And then from here, we're going to put in basically double quotes. It's just really a field code. And, you know, most people who've worked with Excel or any type of formatting, they just kind of realize that this is just a formatting code. It's nothing fancy. Depending on the type of format that you're trying to do, you're obviously going to have to know what code that is. This case, I'm basically doing like a currency code, kind of like also like an accounting code in a sense. And then we're going to do a format, and then we're going to say, okay, you know, that my number placeholder. Okay, I just want that to be my sales cells text. That's really all I'm doing. And then from here, just to kind of give you an idea of what it's going to look like, we're not necessarily doing anything. Well, I can't do that just yet, because if I do it, I'm going to erase everything I currently have. So I'm going to hold off on that one for right now. And then basically what I want to do is, this is where things, you might not understand why I'm doing it like this, but basically what happened was I realized there's a lot of reliability issues that come with working with formulas and field codes. This to me seemed to be the most reliable approach. It's a little bit, what is the word? Extra, in the sense of there's all these extra steps you have to do that you're kind of going like, why do you have to do all that? It's really just to make sure we're focusing on the reliability aspect of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the cell range. So I'm going to say sales cell. I'm going to grab that range property, and then I'm going to do the select method. So this is going to select that range, and then we're going to collapse the range, because I don't need to select all of it in order to insert it. In fact, if I try to insert it after selecting all of it, it's going to fail. So I have to actually collapse it first. So I'm going to now take my Word application. That Word application has a selection property, which returns a selection object that represents a range inside that document that you currently have selected. So with that range object, which is now our selection really, it has a collapse method. That collapse method basically says, do you want to collapse it to the beginning of that range or the end of that range? In this case, I want to collapse it to the start of my range. And so I pass through direction argument, and then I set that equal to 1. So this is basically going to take that range. So it's basically like I select this entire little thing, and then it's going to put it just like that. So now I'm at the beginning of my range. Once I've done that, I can now set my formula. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the formula / like field code, right? So formula / like field code. So I'm going to, oh, actually, I forgot a step. My apologies. I need to now grab the selection again. Grab the selection range. And technically, I mean, I'll just say it like this. I would just break it out into 2 ones right now. On the GitHub code, I might change it if I find that it still works kind of reliably. But right now, I'm just kind of doing the methods that's working reliably. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Word app selection again, and I'm going to define that range, which is now basically the beginning. And I'm going to store it in a new variable called select range. So now I'm going to take that select range, and I'm going to call the fields property, which is all the fields inside that range. And I'm going to call the add method. And then with that add method, there are a few arguments I need to pass through. One of them is, where do I want to put it? Well, in this case, I just want it to be in my selection range. And then next, there is a type. In this case, it's basically empty. So it's an empty field because we're basically populating it with our own field code. So if we want to do an empty field, because we're using late binding, we need to pass through the enumeration, which is -1 in this case. And then there's another argument called text. Well, text is really just the field code. And then finally, there is this this final argument, which is preserve formatting. Most time, usually that's something you want to do. So when you're saying preserve formatting, you're saying, hey, whatever formatting I have, just keep it. In this case, I want to keep it. Okay, so let's see what this does when we run it. Okay, I'm gonna put this, no, I don't wanna. All right. I feel like Darth Sidious some days because my voice gets so raspy, but it's so cool. You can now see that it went through and it formatted each one of those to now take the old text. It's now the field code and it's a formatted field code. So if you were to basically right click, you would see edit field now because now it's a field. And if you look in there, it's the old text, which is basically the original value we had in there. And then also it's the number format. Now, there's obviously a ton of number formats we can do, but for right now, let's just use some of the default ones. Now, this is kind of neat because I really thought about for a second, I said, wow, this is actually kind of neat because you could make like a nice little macro where somebody could, select all the cells and then you could apply a certain formatting to it and it would do it automatically. So I'm really excited about that. I'm gonna see if I can like maybe do that with one of the JavaScript add-ins once I get to that point. They're coming along nicely, by the way, but I think that'd be kind of neat. Now, what we're gonna do in the next one is it's really kind of just exactly the same thing. It's really just taking the same exact concept and we're just now going to do it with the cost column. So we'll call this a cost cell. And so we'll just do cost column dot cells. And then really, it's pretty simple. I'm literally just changing names of variables, nothing super crazy. But I think in this one, I think it's probably nice if we have just something a little bit different in the sense of formatting, just so you can kind of visually see, what does this look like differently? And then we'll do cost cell. So again, the logic's exactly the same. In this case, we're now just doing it with the cost column. And I think in this case, let's see if we can use a different number format. That's kind of boring, but we'll do it anyway. We will do this one. Perfect. All right. So let's see what happens when we now format it with the new one. Oh, and I need to make sure that I have my cost cell text in there. That again, that's kind of really the biggest thing with this one is you're really just changing references and the logic's exactly the same. So you can see it went through, it formatted it just like we wanted to. So now we're going to move on to our final one, which is basically the same thing, but it's just a different type of formula that we're going to be passing through. And then this one, we have to focus a little bit more on understanding, how do we think about a formula when it comes to a word table object, because it actually does follow some similar logic that we would normally find like in an Excel spreadsheet, but it's just a little bit different notation. That's all. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to loop through each cell in the profits column. And we're going to say for profit cell. Profit cell. And then we're going to do profit column. We're going to do the cells property. And because it's in a list, we can now slice that list. And we're going to say we want everything after the first one. And then we need to clear the original list, clear the original text. So we're going to take that profit cell. We're going to then call the range property and then the text property. And we're going to set it equal to a blank, a string. And then from here, we can now create our formula string or our field code. It's kind of up to you how you want to think about it. And then I think in this case, you can kind of think of it the same thing, but so we'll call it field code. Okay. So before I write it, I think it's important to understand, how can you write the notation? Well, again, the table is made up of cells, which are made up of, it's made up of columns and rows, and each one of those is made up of individual fields or cells, basically. Now, it follows the same exact notation on an Excel spreadsheet. So for example, this is column A, this is column B, and then this is column C. Additionally, this is row 1, this is row 2, and then this is row 3. So if I wanted to be really exact, to kind of give you a visual, that would be A1, A2, and then this one would be, B2, and so on and so on. So, right, so that's pretty straightforward. And then we have the R1C1 notation, or is it RNCN notation? So this case, it's row 1, C1, row 1, C2, and then we have row 1, C3. Again, logic is just basically repeating. So now this is row 2, column 2, row 3, column 2. Is it raining outside? Oh, wow. It's sunny and it's raining. It's been really weird. We've had like really weird weather. But yeah, so that's basically the notation. We can carry over this logic when we're defining our formulas, which is very nice because it makes building the formulas very easy in a program, because now we can basically understand the logic behind it. So in this case, I want to define a couple things. In this case, I want my first one to equal something. So just like up here, it's equaling a number. So it's technically a formula, it's just a constant. But in this case, my formula is actually going to reference a cell. So I'm going to say R, I'm going to put a placeholder, and I'm going to say row number. And then I'm going to say column 1. So, okay, so row whatever, column 1, minus row. And then in this case, we're still going to be on the same row. And we're going to now say column 2. So that's basically the actual, the formula component. Now we need the formatting component. So the formatting, we already have that defined. That's up here. So I'm just going to copy that and then put it right after my formula. So again, just to kind of be clear, that's our formula. This is our number formatting. Basically everything that comes after that, so this /# that's your format code. And you can have spaces or not. I tend to just kind of leave one space just for visibility, but normally when you go into the actual field code, it will actually look a little bit different. So Word kind of does its own little thing with it. Now from here, now we can select the range. So we'll do profit, cell, and then we'll do range, and then we'll do select. Then we will collapse the range. And really, to be honest, we can just kind of copy this for right now. Perfect. And then from here, what we're going to do is we're going to put that as our formula in our field code. And then additionally, I forgot, we didn't put our little format in here, probably the most important thing. So now we need to define that row number placeholder. So this one right here. And that row number is simply going to equal the current cell that we're on. That cell has a row property. That row property has an index property, which returns the actual row number. So in this case, we're just so lucky that the object that we're working with actually gives us the information we need to construct our formula. This is going to be very advantageous, I can guarantee you, as we do more complex examples. Understanding what object you're working with and understanding, does that object give you the information you need to build the formula that you're trying to build? Obviously, if it does, It's very helpful. All right, so let's see what happens when we run this. Hopefully it doesn't break. Looks like it worked beautifully. So now if I right click and I edit my field, I will notice it is a formula just like I wanted it to be. Additionally, if this was a constant and it wasn't like a formatted value, what I could do is if I said make this 800,000, for example, and then I right click this to say update my fields, this will now update my formula just like that. So very cool, very useful. Obviously, I think there's definitely opportunity where I think VBA would shine so bright in a situation like this, because there's probably a lot of people who would like to have this Excel type functionality in a more user-friendly manner inside of Word. Unfortunately, that's not really easy to do, but having that VBA component definitely would make it easier. And I am now kind of curious, how can I maybe carry this over to the JavaScript API? Do they give us some type of similar functionality? I think that would be very interesting to see. Additionally, when I do upload this to GitHub, I did make sure to write out all of the VBA equivalent for everybody. It's a little bit different, but nothing too crazy. But here you'll also get the VBA code along with it. Additionally, this will be on the Facebook group as well. But yeah, I think at this point, I covered everything I can cover in this one, and I'm going to take a little bit of a break, give my voice a break. And then I have, I think, hopefully one more video. It's going to be a Python topic. It's very basic stuff. It's just date time stuff, but definitely useful. However, if you have any questions at this point, by all means, put them down in the comments below, and I will do my best to get back to you. Otherwise, during these wonderful times, stay healthy, obviously. Have an optimistic outlook, even better. And, when you're looking at the stock market going, my God, how can it go any lower? There's opportunity there. Oh, well, look at that. Now we get more news in Los Angeles. Great. This is getting crazy. It's absolutely getting crazy. However, I think there's also, I think most people, when they look at the Dow Jones Industrial, that literally scares the hell out of them. Don't get me wrong. I think it's important to have perspective during these moments. Keep in mind, we went through something very similar. This was actually, I think they said close to a 50% drop, almost a 50%. I think it was over 50%. We obviously recovered from that one. I don't think this is going to be any different. The length of the recovery might be a different story, but I think there's also an opportunity here if you're maybe, a long-term investor, definitely I would say a year or two out, maybe even longer. I think you're going to get some very nice companies for very significant discount. And I'm talking like companies like Microsoft and stuff like that. I've definitely been keeping an eye on some of these just because I think there is, I think you're getting some of these guys for a very good discount. Not to say this is necessarily the bottom, and again, not to say it's going to turn around tomorrow, but at a certain point, are you going to necessarily get the bottom? Do you want to get it? Who knows? But it's definitely been an interesting time for the markets just because, again, I've talked to so many people, and nobody really can find a time in their life where, it's been similar to what we've been dealing with. And, I definitely think long-term, this is going to change a lot of things. I think there's going to definitely be some opportunities from an investment perspective, but there's also going to be some things where we're going to have to see, how does this just change, certain industries, and, they've been talking about bailing out certain industries, what is that going to look like and how is that going to impact them? There's just so much that, that we have to kind of get an idea of before I think we can, really begin to fully understand the full extent of what we're going through. So we'll stay updated, to put it nicely. So have a wonderful night, everybody. We will be chatting.